Hello everyone, I'm Peter Gifford and this is the Esoteric Order of Gamers, and today we're going to look at some terrain, MDF terrain by Warcradle Studios. It's the Promethean Refinery, designed for their Dystopian Wars Wild West Exodus game, but you can use it for any steampunk or sci-fi setting. It's pretty spectacular. I'm going to build it, I'm going to show it to you, I'm going to give you some tips on how to build it, and we're going to see how this lovely piece of terrain looks with some Wild West Exodus figures crawling all over it. Let's get started. Well, here we have it, the Promethean Refinery, and what a spectacular centerpiece for a tabletop this is. It's huge and it has a lot of vertical height, which I really like. Not only is there a lot of vertical height, but there's a lot of height levels as you go. 1, 2, 3, 4 as you go up these big towers on either side, which gives you all sorts of interesting sight lines in your games for combats. As you can see, it's really imposing. I love the detail of these towers and all the little stairways going up through them and the modular nature of the tower pieces. Quite easy to build. I spent mostly one evening and a little bit of another evening finishing it off, so it didn't take too long. Now you can choose, of course, to use super glue or wood glue making these. Of course, it is wood, so wood glue is probably the most obvious choice, but remember, wood glue takes a bit longer to dry, so you're going to not only increase your build time, but also you're going to spend a lot of time just sitting there waiting for bits to dry, especially when you're building these big towers and everything. They're made up of lots of little pieces that go together to make the circumference of the tower, and you really want to make sure they're exactly in place and held in place before you add extra bits. So I think building it with wood glue would be quite time consuming and difficult. I used super glue, which was a lot faster because things stuck together really quickly. The problem with that, of course, is that you get super glue all over your fingers. And not only do you get super glue over your fingers, but whatever you do, you're going to get the blackness from where the board or the MDF board has been cut. There's sort of burnt wood there and a bit of charcoal will come off on your fingers. So if you've got super glue and that, you end up with sort of caked black stuff on your fingers. It'll wear off in a day or two. It's not too horrible, but it feels pretty disgusting on your fingers. Maybe using latex gloves or something like that might be easier. So swings and roundabouts for what you use, but I found super glue much faster and easier to use. Now, things fall out of the sprues pretty well. However, the technology is not quite perfect yet. It's so unfortunate they can't sort of get it absolutely consistent. In this one, almost every sheet, things popped out really easily. There was just one sheet where it wasn't totally cut through to the other side, and it's harder to cut. And using a knife to cut out those sheets isn't easy because the laser cut is so fine you can't even get a knife blade in between there, or not even a scalpel blade. So it's very difficult to cut sheets that haven't gone all the way through. So I'm just hoping they can tweak the technology to go all the way through for every sheet, because you really want these pieces to just sort of fall out with just a bit of a nudge rather than having to cut them and things like that. But on the whole, most of them were cut beautifully and came out very easily. Now, the one area where I think there is room for improvement are the instructions. They're available online, so you can download them and use them as you build. However, they're just not 100% clear because they use 3D drawings. Sometimes the drawings, well, they're not drawings, they're 3D diagrams. And sometimes the components are at a bit of a distance, so you can't tell exactly what's going on. Because the pieces aren't numbered as well, you're sometimes guessing what's what. Though some crucial parts of this were numbered, I was pleased to see. That just made things a bit easier. But there were a few points where I went, oh, what is that? I can't see it. I just wish they'd sort of zoom in on some of the builds. And also to be really helpful in the assembly instructions, that if there was a bit that was absolutely crucial, there was sort of a note that said, make sure you do this first, or make sure this is solid before you do that. Just a few notes like that would be really helpful, because there were some bits that I found a bit difficult. Mostly in the towers. I'll just unattach that. You can see there's a middle section here, and this was quite tricky to build. It's got all these little pieces that hold it together. There's one circular piece inside there, and then these pieces attached to that circular spot, and then these bits coming out here and these bits coming out here attached to it all the way around. And you can see I ended up using a bit of putty there just to make sure it fitted snugly to this piece. And I'm going to paint this later, so that doesn't bother me, but you really have to be careful with this section. I put some of these bits that stick out in the wrong place, but I'm going to cut them off So if you want a perfect build, really be careful with this section. It's quite tricky, and you have to make sure it's all evenly done so it fits evenly on the base section. And this is where super glue is your friend, because it'll stick really quickly, and you can hold it in place while it dries. So bits like that, a little bit tricky. In the instructions for that bit, it was very much a case of like, do all this and then do all this, and I went, oh, so I did it that way, and it was really hard to do. And I thought, you know, if I'd done it this other way, it would have been easier. So think ahead. Don't just sort of look at the instructions and start building. Do a little dry fit and make sure that it's fitting together nicely. Now, another tip which is really useful are these towers, and you can see they're just made up of blocks of like 4 sides and a top piece on top. Each one of these levels is a piece that goes on top. So yeah, they're just 4-sided squares. Now, when you're building those, make sure that you put the side with the gear up the top. You'll see on them, I'll show you a close-up, but you'll see on them there's a little gear illustrated. Put that on the top because they have different tabs at the top and the bottom, and you want to make sure those tabs are the same. I realized that right from the start, but if later on when I was speeding up and getting a bit fast, I had to redo some of them because I realized I put them in upside down. And it's very important because the tabs correspond to these pieces that go on top at each level, so they have to be all around the right way. Also, of course, you can do these side pieces in any order you want. I went zigzag, so I went junk, 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 junk as they go up the tower, and I think that looks quite pleasing, but you can put them in any way you want. It doesn't matter which orientation they are on there, as long as the tabs are correct. Now, I really love these solid towers, and I actually didn't glue in these stairs. They're just placed in there, and they're really quite solid. You don't have to glue them. But then we come to this piece here, which feels like a little bit of an afterthought because it only fits on the tower in 2 spots, or on the towers, I should say. Just slots in there. So you've got these really, really solid towers on either side, which are great. And then you've just got this kind of thing just hanging off the side. And it just, to me, it just doesn't feel in keeping with these bits. Really solid constructions and this sort of dodgy floating thing, which isn't attached to anything except the sides of the towers. So yeah, it's funny that I just felt it could have been a bit more solid, perhaps some pieces coming out, or some more pieces coming out from the tower, just making it, you know, solid in keeping with these tower pieces. Because when you put them together, you can see it just sort of floats in space. It doesn't attach. And while it's good to have it as modular pieces, you don't want the whole thing as one piece. It'd be really, really hard to store. You just wish maybe there were some clips. I think I'll make some clips or something that will hold that together neatly. So I just felt like a little bit more engineering there would have been nice. Apart from that, it's got a lovely kind of sci-fi meets steampunk feel. These little corner pieces have gears on them and decoration and stuff, so there's a little bit of steampunky feel with the gears, but it's not overwhelming, so it still would work very well for a sci-fi emplacement. You can glue on this top, but I didn't, and you can see I just sprayed black inside there because all these side pieces fit together nicely, but there are little gaps, so it's good to have that dark inside, otherwise the light inside will shine through and probably spoil the illusion a little bit. So I just sprayed some black spray down in there in both towers, though this one doesn't open up, before I glued on the top on that one as well. And that just improves the look of it a little bit. So all in all, a very nice, impressive and visually dominating piece. And I think the only criticism I have as a playing piece and a visual piece is this sort of floating gantry. Everything else is lovely. And I assume I could actually, you know, do some other builds here if I wanted to. I could take this whole gantry piece off if I wanted to, I think. Let's take that off. And if we actually put these 2 pieces together like so, then we've got a really, really long thing, and then we can put those in front like that. So there are different builds, maybe if they went on either side, so that makes up a whole lovely side to a tabletop, and you've got all these gantries. It almost looks like a viewing platform for an combat amphitheater or something, doesn't it? These builds aren't represented in the documentation or anything, but you can play around with these pieces. You can also, of course, use these pieces individually. And there's one thing I forgot to mention, that this piece is actually built so it slides in and out. So you want to be careful there, but it slides down to that, or it slides up to that. Now, I don't know what function that fulfills. It seems a lot of engineering just to do that thing. But anyway, it's nice. Just a little extra bonus. Of course, you can leave it just like this. It looks great. It's got the gantry pattern on it as well. Or you could paint it all if you want to. I think I'm going to paint the towers, but I'll leave the gantry as it is because it has a sort of painted metal feel already. I think it works quite nicely. And the great thing is that all the corners are dark wood, so you don't have to paint the corners or anything like that. But I think these might be good for a coat, not only because I did that little putty job there, which isn't, very attractive, but also because it might be interesting to just make them a different color or different colors. I don't know, but in the meantime, they look great, and I'll just paint the putty black in the meantime until I get around to painting them. So there you have it. You can see I'm using Wild West Exodus figures because that's a classic Wild West steampunk game. But I think this would be just as well at home with Warhammer 40,000 or any other sci-fi skirmish game. It's big. It's got that lovely vertical feel. There are lots of sight lines to run around in. I just think it's a very nice piece. And next time I do a Wild West battle report, a Wild West Exodus battle report, I'll definitely make sure it's on the tabletop so you can see it in action. Thank you very much to Warcradle Studios for sending me this piece, and I hope you've enjoyed me showing it to you. Of course, go check out the Esoteric Order of Gamers at orderofgamers.com. There is actually a rules and reference sheet for Wild West Exodus there, as well as 430 something other games. I'm on all the social medias. I'm on Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Dun, 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 dun.